Hey guys, drdecks here. Welcome to our current build. I really appreciate you coming to our channel. While I have your attention, will you please click that subscribe button? Today, we are on the uppermost deck of the right side of this project that we're working on. We're actually building 5 decks for this client, 4 on the back of the house, 1 on the front, 2 on the left, 2 on the right. So I've kind of divided these into the right side, the left side, the lower side, and the upper side. So we're on the upper right deck today, and we're installing some Regal Ideas crystal rail pods, some glass mounts on a curve. So I thought it might be interesting for you guys to see how we do that, how we figure it out, how do we get all the spacing proper. There's so much that goes into figuring this stuff out, and I don't think I've ever walked that through with you guys. So today, we're gonna go through and we're gonna mount all of our glass mounts to some plywood templates that I made. And then we're gonna actually get them all installed. There's some drilling of holes that we have to do. We have to drill through several layers of decking, bladder material, peel and stick membrane, waterproof membrane tape, blocking, and solid sawn blocking as well that adds support for the pods. So we will go ahead and start on that, and then I'll kind of show you guys how we do as we go through each step of this install until we finally have a chance to mount a piece of glass. So stick around and let's get this done. All right, come on. All right, so the first thing we have to do is we got to take these pods apart a little bit and take some of the parts off and feed the wires. So we happen to have all these pods powder coated a special color per our client's request. So regardless if they're the standard silver or whatever, there's some reassembly that has to happen when you go to the extent that we did at having these color matched, okay? So we have a 5/32 T-handled Allen wrench that we use. Not only does it fit all the adjustment screws to make these plumb, it also fits the adjustment screw for raising and lowering the height of the glass, which we'll get into later. But those are basically the 4 places that you're gonna need an adjustment handle, like a T-handle or something like that, to be able to make the adjustments. Now, when I lay out all these pods, for me, I like to have a piece of glass that sits out about 6 inches past the pod. So because we're on a curve, and you can see down below, we have custom curved glass that we've had made, and all those are already installed, okay? And we have all the panels up here for this deck right here. I basically have made these templates that are the same curve as that glass, and I've marked them out already 6 inches back. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna mount all of our crystal rail glass mounts to these pieces of plywood and lock them in so that we can figure out the gaps that we have in between the glass, and then we can identify where we're gonna mount all of the crystal rail glass mounts. So that's the first thing we're gonna do. So basically, just running, I'm gonna take this plywood's a little thin, but it's what I had on site to use. So I'm gonna run my line right up against the crystal rail pod, and then I'm gonna start screwing this in, and you can kind of see I have to raise it up just a little bit so that it's snug against my piece of plywood. And then I'm gonna tighten that nice and snug so it sits up against there. I wanna make sure that all my wires face in on the inside of the glass, and that becomes important when you have to start making adjustments to all of your panels of glass later on after the pods are installed. Okay, so like I said before, make sure the wires face in on both sides. Now that that side's locked in, I can come over here, I can line this one up right here and start screwing this one in. And again, I'm gonna have to raise my plywood just a little bit, just so it catches, make sure I've got the right overhang, and lock that in like so. Okay, now that these pods are locked into this piece of plywood, I can move them around back and forth, and I'll be able to keep that as a unit. Now that that's a unit, I know that this panel is gonna sit something similar to this, like so, and I know I need to be an inch away from this seam because I have about a 2-inch gap in between each piece of glass. So once we have all of these put together and we have all of our gaps figured out, then I can decide where I want to mount each glass mount on the deck. I can identify that, and then I can identify the hole we have to drill, because these pods light up. And there's an electrical connection for each one that goes through the deck and connects to a T-splitter cord that also connects to a 24-volt transformer. And then these will all light up at night a really beautiful blue, because the glass that we're using is a low iron glass, which has very low contamination in it. It lights up really pure, really bright blue. So it's a really beautiful look, and we're really excited to show you that, but it won't be in this video. It'll be in a subsequent one coming up soon. Okay, we have this one done, and we'll go ahead and keep mounting more of these, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, so now that we have all of our glass mounts mounted to our plywood templates, I'm going to do the layout to figure out where I need to mount each glass mount. Okay, so I have my 6-inch overhang on each piece. We're going to have about a 3-inch gap in between each piece of glass. So what I'm going to do is I've spaced my first piece of plywood 1.5 inches from the center of the deck. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put an equal gap in between each of these panels to see how it looks, if I'm happy with the spacing and all that stuff. So I got half the distance, 1.5 inches over there, which when I add the other 1.5 inches for the other side will be 3 inches. And then I'm going to put 3 inches in between here, like so. And then I'm going to put 3 inches between this panel as well. And over here, I've got less than 3 inches. I've only got 2 inches. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to adjust everything about 1/4 inch, probably, so that we end up with a little bit less gap. Now, my templates I used first downstairs. So these templates are 1/4 inch shorter than my actual panels of glass. I need to think about that when I'm laying these out. So I'm gonna take this piece that I have here and I'm gonna set it right up on top of this panel of glass, and I'm gonna see how much shorter my template is to make sure I do my layouts properly. It's only 1/4 inch. Oh, it's almost 1/2 inch. I know that these panels of glass are 1/2 inch longer than my template, so I need to I hope that doesn't cost us. Oh, Jesus. I'm almost 1/2 inch longer with these glass panels, which means I can probably afford a 2.5 inch gap. Even if I have a 3 inch gap on my templates, my glass gap's gonna probably be closer to 2.5 inches, which is fine. That's about what I want. That's similar to what I have downstairs. So that was the whole idea. By making these panels a little bit longer than the ones downstairs, we were gonna have about a 2.5 inch gap in between each panel once everything was completed. Now that I know that, now that I know the width of the glass is a little bit wider than my templates, I just need to adjust for that before I start mounting these into the deck. I'm gonna go for, the gap down below is between 2 and 2.25 inches is our final gap between glass panels. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for up here as well. I have an adjustment on the far end that I can make a little bit narrow or a little bit wide. So that's great. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this over this way 1/4 inch, and then I'm gonna put maybe a 2.5 inch gap in between the other two sections to see what I end up with at the wall on the other side. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this into 1.25 inches. Okay, now I'm gonna move down here. Let's see, if I have a 1/2 inch gap, that would give me a 2 inch gap of my glass. Let's just see what happens there. So I got 2.5 here, and if I move this one to 2.5 here, it looks like I got a little bit more gap down here, 3.5. That's a little too big. It meets the code. It meets the code, it's just that this gap will be a little bit bigger than the rest of the deck. So I'm gonna change it a little bit so it becomes a little bit more equivalent, okay? Put a 3 inch gap here, put a 3 inch gap here. That gives me 2.5 here. So I think what I'm gonna do is go 2 3/4, 2 3/4, 2 3/4, 2 3/4. I have all 2 3/4 inch gaps between my panels over here, and each subsequent panel should be pretty close to the same. So now we're just gonna lay out the other side, and then we'll start mounting the pods onto the deck. All right, now that I have all my spacing done the way I want it, I have a 2 3/4 inch gap going all the way around for my templates. I'm gonna start marking not only where the glass mount needs to be installed, but I'm also gonna mark with a white Pica marker where I need to drill my holes for each of the wires that needs to go through the deck. That's what I'm gonna do now. And then once that's done, we can start installing these glass mounts. All right, so now that we have our holes all drilled out and we're ready to go, we can feed our wires through the holes, and then we can start fastening our glass mounts to the deck. So the first thing we have to do is take these wires that will light up the rail pods and start by shoving those down these holes that we've drilled, like so. And you want to kind of give them a nice path so that it's loose. You don't want to like try to make it too tight, or make sure that these wires aren't jumbled up too much. So sometimes I'll pull the pod to the side and go ahead and shove the line down, because we're gonna connect those later. Once I do that, then I can line up the pencil marks I've made. Now I know where to drill for the fasteners. So that's the next step, is I'm going to pre-drill the holes, install the fasteners part way, then put a bead of clear through the roof on them, and then drive them all the way down. And then I'm going to seal the holes up where the fasteners are, and then we can go from there. So usually I'll drill one hole. I'm gonna go ahead and get one started. And usually what we do is we take some clear through the roof and we inject that all the way around the fastener, and we give it a healthy amount. And then if I'm happy with the way that's sitting, as I install this screw and it starts going down, it's gonna drag this product through the hole and into the threads. And now it's locked in, and we just leave it like that because we don't want any moisture. Now there's a beauty cap that goes over the top of all these fasteners. So it's gonna shed most of the water, but if any water gets into this area, it's not gonna go through that seal, okay? So now that that one's in, I'm gonna go ahead and drill the other three, and we'll do the same thing. Now, I've done this a couple different ways where I've actually only put one fastener in each pod, and then actually took the glass and set it in and make sure the pods are aligned. But yesterday when we were installing the lower deck, we did all that and everything fit really good. If you're using tighter curves, you may consider waiting to put all four fasteners in until you can actually fit the piece of glass to make sure it fits perfectly. I'm confident though that this piece of glass is gonna fit just fine once we go ahead and fasten all four of these down. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and get these installed and then silicone up my holes, and then I'll bring a piece of glass over and show you how it fits. Okay, that side's done. Now I'm gonna go on to the other side and do the same exact thing I just did here. These things are very well adhered. There's a solid block of 4x6 material below the pod that will hold it in place for a very long time. Okay, I'm gonna lay this one out. I like that. Another tip, guys, when I'm doing this, I put a 6-inch extension on both drills, you'll notice, because it helps keep my drill away from this freshly powder coated, beautifully painted glass mount. And that way I'm not marking up the sides or marring them up. So I do suggest getting yourself a couple high quality, these are made by Diablo, 6-inch extensions. So that works out for you as far as keeping clearances. That's really important when you're doing high-end work, that you don't mark up your materials when you're installing. All right, now that these pods are mounted, I'm gonna take this piece of plywood out of here, that they're sitting at the right angle, and I know that when we go to install the glass, they're fitting at the right angle. I'm gonna back these mounting screws out. I'm gonna make sure they're all the way out. Even the top ones, I wanna make sure everything's at least flush and not sitting out too far, because that can mess you up when you go to do your install. Pull that out of the way. Next step is you want to seal the holes where the wires are going in. I always pull my wires back. If I ever need to pull this pod and replace this light, it gives me enough extra line so I can pull this out and easily replace the light. If they're really tight like this one is, you may have a hard time getting this out and getting the light replaced. So it's better if you give it a little bit of slack now before you seal this hole. So I'm gonna pull this out like so, just to give it enough slack so that when we go to seal this up, when you pull this out, it'll relax a little bit. And this is where you gotta seal both sides of the wire, and you might want to move it around a little bit and make sure that you get enough sealant in here that water's not going to flow in there. Once that's done, then you can take your beauty cap and go over the top of this, because you have to put this on before you put on your glass. And I don't care how much sealant I use when I'm doing this step right here. Does not matter. Use as much as you need to make sure that baby stays put. Awesome. So now that those are in, I'm gonna go grab a piece of glass and bring it over here and show you how we install that. Now the glass is just resting in the glass mounts. We have 2 pieces of silicone wrapped aluminum that's gonna clamp each side of the glass. So those need to go in on each side of the panel, and that'll get it close to plumb, but not 100%. And then we have the adjustment screws that we use on both sides to make it level. So that's what I'm gonna do next, is get these installed. I'm gonna try to sneak these in from the back. Usually we'll have somebody on a ladder on the other side, but this is gonna be a tough one because we don't really have great access from the corner. And then these 2 will go in like so. Now that we have the glass in with these rubber grommets, let me grab a torpedo level and we'll level this up, and I'll show you how we tension these together. We're just gonna put the torpedo on the glass, and the top needs to go out. So the first thing we do is we just see how these are loose. We're just going to get them snug, not super tight, just snug to the glass. Okay, so that side's good. So now I'm gonna go around here. And like I said before, usually somebody would be on a ladder to do this part. You kind of have to after a certain point, okay? Now I'm gonna take a closer look at the level. So the top needs to go out. So what I would do is I would tighten the inside of the top screw, and that'll make it go out. And I'm pretty tight, so I'm gonna have to loosen the back side of the top screw. And I can also tighten the bottom of this one on the bottom to make it go out as well. And I'll have to loosen this one a little bit to allow for that to happen. Okay, so now let's take a look and see. We're close, but the top still has to go out. So I'm gonna cinch on this pretty good. Not quite enough. I'm gonna back this out over here. Okay, it's completely backed out. So I'm gonna cinch on this front one some more until I get it where I want it. Between the 2, we'll loosen the bottom up and we'll tighten the back side of this. It will get the glass to move into plumb. And there we go. That looks really good. There you go, guys. That's how we install the glass. There's also a height adjustment as well that you can do in the bottom of the pod. You basically use the same tools to detension or tension that to make the glass raise and lower to your height. So if you have a couple panels that aren't sitting together, you can raise one to come up to the other one, and then you tighten them up, lock them in, get them into plumb, and then it's off to the wiring of the panel. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. If you got something out of it, don't forget to click that subscribe button and hit that bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Thanks for watching this video. Have a great day.